Chief Financial Officer, is joining us from Dallas, and he's going to make sure that I also keep a close eye on your questions. If you have questions, you can write them in or raise your hand as we go. Okay, so changing presenters. Esther, I'm going to pass this on to you if you do additional introductions and talk about pimping your LinkedIn profile.
LinkedIn profile. Hey everyone, this is Esther. Thanks so much, Cindy, for your generous intro. Tonight we'll talk about how to spruce up your LinkedIn profile so that you can achieve all of the different goals that you have. And that was a super helpful poll for me to know that a lot of you are using LinkedIn primarily for networking, and some of you are using it to find jobs and advance in your careers. And that's wonderful. So I'll be going into some tips and tricks about how to do that better. As Cindy mentioned, I am a content and insights marketing manager at LinkedIn, and I had the privilege of working for NAP for about 5 years. So I'm really excited to share with you, my NAP brothers and sisters, about how you can really improve your personal presence on LinkedIn. Just a little bit about LinkedIn first. Our vision is to connect people with opportunity. And that's what I'm hoping to do for you guys today, is to help you guys connect better with opportunity. This session is for all types of people. Can you see my slides just as a double check here? I'm scrolling through.
No, I'm not seeing it.
Okay,
no.
Let's see. I'm going to push play on show my screen. And if you guys could type into the chat box.
There we go. We got it.
Okay, perfect. All right, so this session is for many different types of people: students and job seekers who are looking for a job, just seasoned professionals who want to advance, executives who want to stay current with their industries, and finally, business owners who are looking for customers, suppliers, and just kind of keeping tabs on competitors. I think most of you probably fall into the first three categories, so I'll probably keep the presentation tailored to that tonight. So what we'll talk about is three main things: how to build your brand, build your network, and finally, build engagement on LinkedIn. And engagement can be with anyone, but mainly we want to focus on your target audience, whether that's recruiters or other people you want to network with, or people that you're looking to recruit. First, how do you build your brand on LinkedIn? Let's talk a little bit about why. Your social media presence, particularly on LinkedIn, you can think of it as your professional storefront for your recruiters and colleagues. A lot of the time, it's the first impression they have of you, because before they even reach out to you or right after they do, they'll often go to your LinkedIn profile and kind of check you out. So you want to be prepared for that. And second, LinkedIn is a great way to network while you're sleeping. You don't have to maintain it once you've got it up there. You can kind of spruce it up here and there, but for the most part, it does the work for you. The vast majority, or 70% of employers, have rejected somebody because of info they found about that person online. So if you're looking for a job, you're part of that, quarter of this audience who's looking for a new job. Don't be one of those people that a recruiter rejects because they found something about you on LinkedIn or any other social media site. So 85% and even higher percent of employers say that a positive online reputation influences their hiring decisions. So if you have a stellar LinkedIn profile and have great thought leadership and blog posts and things like that, that heavily influences employers who are looking at your profile. So first tip is to add a professional photo to increase your views. Having a photo versus not having a photo increases your view rate by 14x. That's a huge stat. And if you look on the right-hand side, you'll see a heat map of how people tend to view other people's LinkedIn profiles. And you'll see that the photo and the name as well as the header get the most views. So you want to make sure that that photo is one that represents your brand really well. Make sure you pick a photo that communicates what you want it to communicate, whether that is somebody who has an executive presence, somebody who is fun and approachable, or maybe you want to communicate something entirely different. Just make sure that your photo matches up with that, because that's a really important first impression you want to make. Personally, when I added a photo and search engine optimized myself, recruiters started in-mailing me left and right. And about once a month, I get an in-mail from a recruiter trying to get me to join their company. This is in stark contrast to before I had a photo where 0 recruiters were contacting me. So for me, it made a huge difference. And so if you don't have a photo, I really encourage you to put one up there. It'll probably get you some great results. Another really important tip is to make sure that your headline is not only snappy and catchy, but it's also keyword aware, so that you can properly brand yourself and also increase your findability to the types of people you're trying to reach. So for you, it might be different. Like if your goal is to, for example, just purely network with other people, maybe it's a branding play. And so you want to make sure that your brand stands out in your headline. But if you're a job seeker, maybe you want to get found for certain keywords that relate to the types of jobs that you're going for. So for me personally, I wanted to brand myself as somebody who, who is very employable and is kind of doing well in my career. And so I found a lot of great keywords around what I do. Inbound, content, and growth marketing are some really popular keywords that are associated with what I do. So that's what I use for my headline. And I encourage you to figure out what makes sense for yours. Also, the summary is really important. It's a great way to really differentiate yourself from other people. It's important in your summary to share a little bit about what you do. The rest of your LinkedIn profile does say this, but if you can say it in a well-written and engaging way, that goes a long way. Share what makes you different, or in other words, your competitive advantage. This helps people really know what makes you somebody they should get to know, somebody they should hire. So make sure that that comes through in your messaging. And, that's a hard thing to do sometimes, so it might take a little bit of reflection and rewording and things like that. So, give it, 10, 15 minutes to really think that through. Your passion. Now, that's something you can't necessarily write about in the rest of your LinkedIn profile or in your resume or in your cover letters. Well, you could in your cover letters, but in your summary, it's another place where you can really communicate what it is that makes you tick. And that is, kind of the emotional side of things, or a way to engage people that isn't just, a list of accomplishments. They want to see the human side of you and what you really enjoy doing, because oftentimes that is what differentiates you from other people. And lastly, make sure you are really selling or, showcasing your skills or your company. And don't be shy about sharing what it is that you're an expert at, but also don't be overly braggy, right? So there's a nice balance that you can probably strike there with showcasing what it is you've accomplished, your skills, and what kind of company you work for. Now, one of my other recommendations is to show, don't tell. And how do you do this? Well, on LinkedIn, it's great because you can upload rich media so others can see your work for themselves. So on my LinkedIn profile, for example, I've uploaded a YouTube video that I was part of, a SlideShare deck that I created, a blog post that I wrote, and an ebook and a report that I, authored, as well as an infographic that I worked with a designer to create. So a lot of your work can, instead of, being out there in the ether, can be showcased to the people that you want to see it. So it's a great way for you to link to the things that you've done so that other people know exactly how good you are. Another great tip is to really max out your skills. So in LinkedIn, you can include your skills at the bottom of your profile. The more you include, the better your chances are of ranking higher in people's searches of you. Because oftentimes recruiters and companies are looking for keywords. They're looking for social media strategists, people who are great at project management. So make sure that the things that you know and are good at are on your LinkedIn profile and max that out. I think the limit right now is 50. So go ahead and put all of those on there, regardless of how many endorsements you have. Endorsements are a nice way to show that other people validate your skills. However, if you have a skill that's on there and it's not endorsed, no problem. Just make sure it's on there, and that will help you rank in people's searches. And finally, make sure you're getting strong recommendations. And the ideal person to get a strong recommendation from is your former boss. Why? Because your bosses know so much more about your accomplishments and can speak truthfully about your strengths. If you get, your friends and colleagues, oftentimes that is, it's a good testimonial, but it's not as powerful as somebody who's managed you and really knows your work. If you're a business owner, this might not apply, and so maybe you want to get your customers or your suppliers to testify to how great you are in terms of how great of a business you have or your customer service. So that's building your brand on LinkedIn. I'm just going to stop for a few questions to make sure that if you guys have any questions about that section, I can answer them live right now.
So Esther, I'm going to look through the questions. This is Cindy. I'm going to see if we have any burning questions that I can read out to you and you can address. Win San, actually I know this gentleman, says you can rearrange your skills too. And then Farzana Nayani asks one question regarding skills. Do you get ranked higher in searches if you have more clicks for each skill?
So your endorsements do help a little bit, but what helps more is just plain and simple having that skill on your profile. So yes, it's great, go get endorsed for your skills, but top priority is to make sure those skills are listed in the first place.
We also have a couple questions. Folks wanted to know if you can make a copy of your presentation available. If the answer is yes, I would put it with our webinar page on NAP.org.
I should be able to, yes. And I believe we're also
Wonderful.
recording this presentation so that anyone can listen to it afterwards.
That's right. Stanley Chung asks, you mentioned search engine optimization. How do you go about doing that?
The main way is keywords. So depending on what you want to get ranked for, make sure that you have related keywords for that. So for example, I'm in marketing, and there's a lot of different words and ways you can say marketing. Social media marketing, marketing strategy, marketing research. So I'm going to make sure that the things that I want to, those types of words, that they're somewhere on my profile, whether through the skills or the summary or the other parts of my LinkedIn profile. And once they're on there, that makes me more eligible to be ranked for them when recruiters and other folks are putting them into their searches. And so for me personally, the way that I find out what those words are, I will go onto Google AdWords and just take a look at, I'll put in some keywords that I want to be ranked for, and then they'll often share some recommendations for related keywords in Google search. If you don't know how to use Google AdWords, it's not too hard. I don't know if you can have if there's a free version of it, but if there is, that's one route. But another route is to just use your intuition for different types of keywords related to what you want to rank for. Any other questions, Cindy? Okay, well, if there are no other questions, then let's go on to the second section on building your network.
Oops.
Did somebody have a question?
Actually, Esther.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was on mute. Yes, there's.
No worries.
There's a couple more questions. That was Tommy.
Okay.
So Esther, we'll take a couple more questions and then we'll get back to your presentation. So do you recommend asking recommendations from current bosses? Asked Sean. Sean's asking, do you recommend asking recommendations from current bosses?
I would say it depends on how long you've worked with them and how well they know your work. If you've been working with someone for, let's say, 6 months and they know your work relatively well, then it's probably okay to ask for their recommendation. Personally, I tend to ask them towards the point at which I'm about to switch jobs, because then they can kind of share all of the things that I've done with and for them. But it's really up to your discretion, and so don't be afraid to ask a current boss if that's something you want to share right at the moment.
There's one more question, and then we'll get back to your slides. There's a profile strength indicator. What does this really measure?
So the profile strength indicator tells you how far along or how filled out your profile is. And the reason why that's important is the more filled out your profile is, the more likely you are to rank in other people's searches of you. And that's really helpful for networking and also being found by recruiters. So the top level of profile strength is All-Star, and that's something that I have right now. It just means that you've got probably about 90% of the different fields filled in, and that helps other people get a full picture of who you are. So I highly recommend filling out as many of those fields as you can and trying to get up to the All-Star ranking. Great questions, guys. So let's go on to the networking section. How do you build your network on LinkedIn? So why is this important? Well, all of you probably already know this, having been in NAP and doing a lot of networking. It's a way to build your professional Rolodex online. Gone are the days where you are stocking up your business cards and going through them one by one. I sometimes do that, but it's really much more rare than simply connecting with someone on LinkedIn and then keeping tabs on them through their different updates on my homepage feed. Also, the more connections you have, the higher your search rankings and findability by recruiters, business partners, customers, etc. And finally, if you're a small business owner or a medium or large business owner, it helps you generate leads and referrals for your business. So lots of great reasons to network on LinkedIn. 70% of jobs are found through networking, not through applying online, not through social media, through networking. So, make sure that your LinkedIn profile and other parts of your social media presence are up to snuff so that you are really doing your very best in terms of presenting a professional presence for networking. One way to get started with networking, if you don't have a whole lot of contacts, is to import your email contacts and use our People You May Know widget to identify past connections. This is a really simple way to just get a whole bunch of contacts in one fell swoop. I tend to do this, once every year or so to make sure that my LinkedIn network is up to date and to make sure I'm not missing anyone. So if you haven't done that in a while, you could refresh and make sure you're capturing a lot of the contacts that you want to stay in touch with in a professional context. Another great way to network is to find alumni. LinkedIn has an alumni tool that allows you to identify people who graduated around your year in college or in grad school. So make sure that you're using that to get more connections and to make sure that everybody that you know and want to keep in touch with is part of your network. With the Alumni Tool, it's actually really great because if you are looking for a job, just as an example, the Alumni Tool allows you to narrow down to exactly the type of job that you want and help you identify people that you should talk to in those roles. So just as an example, for me, if I'm job seeking and I know where I want to live, i.e. the San Francisco Bay Area, I go to the Alumni Tool and I can click on San Francisco Bay Area. And what that does is that then highlights for me all of the different companies that my SF Bay Area network is in, and then all of the different functions that those people work in. So, once I'm there, I can then narrow down a little bit further. So I'm in marketing. Maybe I only want to talk to people who are in marketing so I can build my network there. So I can go over to what they do and click on marketing. And once I do that, the companies where my network, most of my network works at, will rise to the top in terms of where they work. So I can go through, and it turns out that for my own personal network, Google is where a lot of my network is working when they work in marketing. And Genentech, Cisco, Clorox, Facebook. So these are a lot of great companies that if I want to go work there someday, I will have probably a first, second, or third degree connection who can help me get into those companies. Another way to find contacts is the advanced people search. So this is probably something that you've already taken advantage of, but if you know approximately what you're going for, you can also look for people using keywords, their name, their title, their company, and a lot of other fields. So if you want to just go directly to advanced people search and then get a list of potential contacts, you can do it that way as well. Now, just a few tips on networking. This is an example of somebody who wrote me a networking email. I'm going to give you guys about 20 seconds to just read through this and type in your responses or your thoughts and feelings to this networking email. And then, Cindy, if you don't mind reading those, that would be really helpful. Cindy, are we getting responses to this email?
Not yet. So if people have specific reactions or responses to this slide, go ahead and type it into your questions. And someone said, for instance, Dale Ting says he's still reading. He's a friend. Glencoe says, sounds like a cold email. Eileen Ishmael says, instead of being straight up, I would ask for an informal interview first. Brian Foe says, too long, lengthy. Albert Ho says, there's no prior relationship with this person. Dale Ting said, first thought, it didn't look too bad.
Great, thanks guys, that's really helpful. So I reacted similarly to some of you when I first saw this email. I personally wasn't clear on what they were asking me to do. They said, I'm attaching my resume for reference, is the last line. And I didn't know what they wanted me to do with that, to be honest. Like, did they want me to forward it to somebody, or did they want me to take a look at it and review it? It was super unclear to me. So that was one thing. A second thing that stood out to me was the tone of the email. So when I read it, I felt like she was kind of like expecting me to help her and not really super excited or grateful for me to help her. Not all of you reacted that way, but when I saw this email, that was one of my reactions. I thought the length was fine. It took me, 30 seconds to read through it. But I think overall the tone of it was probably the thing that bothered me the most. And also this second follow-up email at the very bottom. That was another thing that piqued my interest, because she was interested in one role in her first email, and then in her second email she followed up and said, by the way, I'm interested in these other two roles that are slightly unrelated to the first role. Now, in normal circumstances, I totally get that. Like, you might not understand what jobs you're applying to, and you want to apply to multiple to increase your chances. I've done it before. But I didn't know what her motives were. And if she had just taken, a couple sentences to explain to me why she was applying for these different roles, that would have helped a lot. But when I got this email, I just got the impression that she just didn't have a clear direction, and was just simply using me to refer her to jobs internally. And actually, I wasn't even sure if she wanted me to refer her because she didn't ask me to. So very kind of a strange email. So don't be this person. Now, take a look at this email and tell me what your reactions are to this. And Cindy, if you could help and read some of people's reactions, that would be really helpful. What are your guys' reactions to this email?
Well, Vincent felt that there was more flattery on this one. Dale said, didn't ask for too much to start. Oh my gosh, it's flying through. You guys are writing so quickly. Let's see, Grace said, showed interest in Esther's background and career path, genuine personality, and wanting to get to know more about marketing and brand management. Glenn says, a lot more personal. Doesn't seem like this person is soliciting me for a job. Grace said, much better, more appreciative. Robin said, person's very excited. And Jarlene said, very keyword heavy. Eileen said, this person really researched Esther and wants to learn more and do some work. Morris Wong said, punctuation, more of a two-way interaction, very friendly, getting to know you as a person and learning your story. And a couple more, and I'll stop. Personable, direct in stating and asking, sounds upbeat and positive, asking for the next step. And then taking better steps in building a relationship first, very conversational instead of asking for a favor. Ask for an informational interview, sounds a lot more human and personal. Okay. So, Esther, what did you think?
Cool. Well, I reacted pretty much exactly the same way that everyone on this webcast reacted. I was excited that she was excited. She was very specific about why she was reaching out to me. So I was like, oh, I can help this person. She had a great way of just like asking to connect and chat about something. So I knew exactly what she wanted and I wasn't confused. And then overall, the tone was just a lot more grateful. And yeah, there were a lot of exclamation points, that's for sure. But it didn't bother me because overall, she was excited and happy to reach out. And so that like positivity really was contagious for me, and I wanted to help her. And our phone call actually went exactly the same way as this email, where she was just very positive and interesting and engaging. So it made me want to help her. So the tone and the specificity of your message and all of these things that we've talked about and that you guys brought up are really important to keep in mind when you're networking. Some tips. Keep it short, sweet, and not canned. When it's canned, you can tell. I can tell. So don't have a canned message. It's fine to have templates, but remember to really customize. 2, say who you are and why you're interested. The why is so important because it helps the other person know how exactly they can help you. And, if it's a weak reason, then they're going to be a lot less motivated to want to help you. 3, show you tried to figure things out. If you email me asking me, what jobs are available at LinkedIn, I'm going to be like, well, go to LinkedIn and look at what jobs are available, or, do some research. Right? So show that you've tried and that you are genuinely, stumped and you need my help to help you figure things out. And lastly, the tone. Be grateful. Don't be entitled. Make sure that comes through in your messaging because that will ultimately get the person to want to help you, and they might even be able to give you way more than you expected because you just showed a little bit of gratitude. So, getting on the phone is often one of the best ways to network. And when you're on the phone, I just encourage you guys to ask really good questions. So, for example, like when people talk to me about jobs at LinkedIn and they ask me what the culture's like, it's a good question because it's hard to get that information anywhere else. But honestly, I think a better question might be something to the effect of, I saw on Glassdoor that your culture is XYZ, or I talked to this person and I've heard that LinkedIn is like this. What do you think? Do you agree? That kind of tells me like you put a little bit of effort into the things that you're asking me about. So I think just, do just a tiny bit of homework. You don't have to spend hours. Just spend a couple minutes researching each of your questions to make sure that the answer isn't already out there. So that is how you want to build your network. And I'm just going to stop there for a couple minutes to make sure I answer some of your questions. So what questions do you have for me about building your network?
I'm not seeing any questions yet, but there were a couple questions from building your brand that I wanted to see if we could try to address from earlier.
Yeah.
Okay, let me see if I can get back to them. So Darlene Ho asked, how do you showcase your work when it's not product-oriented or is confidential in nature?
Yeah, so I actually had a situation like that where in my last role in sales operations, literally every single thing I worked on was internal and confidential. So it was really hard for me to showcase any rich media about it. And in fact, I ended up not showcasing anything because we ended up not launching the thing that I was working on. So that was slightly disappointing. But, even so, there could be some aspects of what you're working on that you can share. So perhaps, for me, the way that I worked around it was I got one of my bosses to talk about what I did on LinkedIn through the recommendation. So that's one thing. Another thing you might want to do is take a look at what you're doing outside of work. Is there anything outside of work that showcases the same skills that you want to showcase from your job? For example, when I was involved in NAP, I was business development officer and did a lot of sales-related stuff. And there was no real concrete way for me to show that. So I decided to upload to my LinkedIn profile the prospectus that we send to all of our sponsors as a way to showcase, like, hey, I can think strategically about doing sales, and here's one concrete thing that I produced for our organization that helped us raise $500,000 in 1 year. So figure out ways, to showcase the skills, the core skills that you have, and maybe it's not through your job, but maybe it is through something outside of work. Anything else, Cindy?
Oh, I'm sorry, I was muted. Esther, so Glenn asked, how do you remove endorsements that you don't want to show on your profile?
Yeah, I sometimes would like to remove endorsements of people who have no idea like what that skill is about and have never really worked with me and endorsed me anyway. I don't think there's currently a way to do that, but that is one big piece of product feedback that I have, and I'm totally with you on wanting to be able to do that. So sorry, at this point, you can't remove endorsements, but you can hide recommendations if they're not necessarily, up to par or up to the quality standards that you want. So what I've done with some recommendations that I've gotten that are good but not amazing is I've hidden them from my profile and only showed the ones that are, really well written and thoughtful.
There are two pretty simple questions I think I could answer, but I'm going to turn to the expert here. One person asked, if you're currently looking for a job but don't want to alarm your current employer with major updates, are there privacy settings on LinkedIn? A second person asked, is there any way for your employer to write a recommendation for you on LinkedIn?
So the answer to that is I recommend that there's a hide updates on the right-hand side of your LinkedIn profile. Definitely use that. So you want to hide all of your different updates from your employer, and you can hide them from all of your contacts as well. So that way nobody can see, when you're putting new things onto your profile, and nobody can see, when you're doing some different job searching activities. So make sure that button is clicked. And my computer just went off. Can you guys still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great.
While you address your computer, Alice, you had asked, is there a way for your employer to write recommendations for you in LinkedIn? Yes, actually, I've seen most people write there is a recommendation tool, and you can ask your employer or a colleague or a client to write it for you, and then you can decide whether or not to post it. I've actually had that exchange with a couple of co-workers who left the company at the same time I did, and we ended up writing endorsements for one another, but we did talk about what skill sets we wanted to feature. So there was a little bit of back and forth, not to be dishonest, but to really focus on the things that we needed to highlight.
Awesome.
So there is a tool. Okay, Esther, are you back in business?
So my computer is having technical difficulties, but what I'll do is finish the presentation verbally so that you guys know the last section, which is building your engagement. So build engagement. How do you do that with LinkedIn? Well, there's actually probably a couple really important ways to build engagement. One way is to follow the influencers and companies that you're interested in, because that way you'll get the most up-to-date news about them. And then you can start to share that or just simply stay up to date yourself. And then if you, for example, are following a company that you're interested in working for and they post a status update and you comment on it and you share it and you have thoughtful things to say, that really helps give the impression that you are truly interested in working for that company. So really important to follow the right companies, influencers, and even to join the right groups, because a lot of recruiters are looking in groups when they're recruiting people in a certain industry. So make sure you're following the groups that on LinkedIn that are, where people in your industry are. So that's one thing. A second way to build engagement is through either, micro blogging / like status updates, or through posting your own blogs and thought leadership. For me personally, when I started posting, micro updates, people really reacted to them and started commenting and liking, and my view rate started really skyrocketing. So it's something that's really easy to do. Once a week, get on LinkedIn and say and share something of value to the people in your network. Another thing that I've discovered about blogging is I've written 4 blogs in the past year, and each time I write a blog, it just increases your not only your views, but the way people see you in the area of expertise that you're sharing about. So, for example, for me, I'm blogging a lot about career advice and business school and how to think about education. So in that realm, I'm starting to get ranked for a lot of those things. My blog posts are starting to get ranked, and people are starting to reach out to me with questions. Recruiters have started to read my stuff and actually ask me about the information. So, writing a couple or one even simple blog post showcasing what it is you know and how you can add value to others is a really powerful way to engage your network. So if you are just purely networking, or if you are seeking for jobs and you have an area of expertise that you and nobody else can really speak to as well as you can, I would highly encourage you to write a very simple 300 to 500 word blog post and see where that takes you. And for me personally, it's allowed me to be ranked among the top 5 to 10 when it comes to people of my similar category. LinkedIn Premium has this great feature where you can see how you're ranked versus your peers. And so whenever I take a look at that, I am totally blown away to see that I'm usually in the top 5 to 10 because of a lot of this posting that I'm doing. So definitely, following the right people and then posting or microblogging are 2 really important ways to engage your community. Let me just stop there for any last questions about engagement or building your network or building your brand.
Esther, there's a number of questions that came in while you were speaking. A lot of them seem to relate to just kind of the nuts and bolts of working LinkedIn, but there are some questions about networking, and some of them include concerning networking, is there such a thing as too many contacts? And a related question is, do you add strangers that have never met you before on LinkedIn? Those are 2 questions.
Yeah, I think with the number of contacts, it's less about the number, and it's really more about the quality. You want to make sure that the people you're adding are people you know or have come into contact with, because say someone, one of your friends comes to you and they're like, hey, I see that you're connected with so-and-so. Can you put me in touch? Imagine how embarrassing it would be if you were like, well, I actually don't know that person, so I'm sorry, I can't put you in touch. So just make sure that everyone you connect with is someone you know in some capacity. So I think it's less about the number and more about the quality. I know a lot of people who, like influencers, for example, who do just know a ton of people and know a fair number, and they're connected to them on LinkedIn. And I think that's great. I think where you kind of get in trouble is where you start to connect with complete strangers, and then you start to get a lot of noise in your newsfeed, and you often are not going to be as helpful to the people looking to network with you. So that's my thought: quality, not quantity.
Great, thanks. There's another set of questions that relate. How do you showcase your work when you're going from one career to another in different industries? And then someone else that asks about how do you use volunteer experience in causes versus organizations? Where would you put something like NAP? Should it be listed under work or should it be listed under volunteer?
So let me address the first question first. So, sorry, Cindy, would you mind repeating the first question?
Yeah, the first question is, how do you showcase your work when you're going from one career to another?
So career changing is awesome, and I commend you for making the big switch. Going from one career to another, there's often a lot of transferable skills that you can still showcase on your profile. And if you want to showcase those skills, then some of the best ways to do that is through your bullet points and what you write about what you've done. You did XYZ and you achieved these results using these skills, and here's why it matters to the business. So through your bullet points, you can communicate some of those really key transferable skills that are going to apply to your past career as well as the one you're going into. So that's one thing. If you want to show rich media, then oftentimes rich media is a great way to show the end result. And sometimes that does communicate what those underlying transferable skills are. So like, for example, if sales is your underlying transferable skill, then perhaps the sales pitch deck that you created is something that you want to upload into your rich media to show your sales skills. That's just one example, but there's many, many more. The second question about where to put volunteer experience like NAP. So this is probably up to you, although from what I've seen, I prefer to see volunteer experience in a volunteer section, because otherwise it gets confusing to recruiters who are trying to figure out, what is it that you do for your job, or, like what is your real work versus your volunteer work. So it really helps to distinguish those categories. And when you do put it in your volunteer work, it's still valuable. A lot of employers see your volunteer experience as legitimate work experience. So just because it's in a volunteer section doesn't mean it's less important. It just helps recruiters to distinguish between what you did for money versus what you did in your spare time. And oftentimes, what you do in your spare time says a lot about what you're passionate about and what you potentially are very good at. Any other questions?
Yep. There's a whole bunch of questions. You're not getting tired, are you? For recommendations from managers, how do you get them when corporate guidelines forbid recommending and talking about direct reports' performance?
So the question is about, if you have corporate guidelines on how to recommend somebody, how do you incorporate that into your LinkedIn recommendation?
Yes.
That's an interesting question. I think that if you do have some strict corporate guidelines about bosses saying things about you, then try to stick with them. You work with your boss to figure out what is the best thing that they can say about you that won't go against any guidelines. Oftentimes it's a dialogue back and forth between your boss about what to write and what not to write. So, for example, when I asked for my recommendations, I provided my former bosses with a bulleted list of things that they could say, because oftentimes they just don't have the time or might not even remember things that you might have done back in the day. So what's usually very helpful is for you to provide a few bullets, or if they request it, even like fully written out sentences that they can then edit so that they feel comfortable sharing things about you with the broader public. if there's something confidential, then they need to use their discretion to not share that information. But by and large, a lot of bosses, if they feel uncomfortable recommending you, they probably won't even recommend you at all. So, it doesn't hurt to ask and start that dialogue with your boss.
Great. We do have a couple other questions about a question from Grace is, do you have any recommendations on maintaining your network after you link in with them? Do you recommend reaching out periodically with an email or sharing news articles, blogging, etc.?
Yeah, so staying engaged with your network is actually pretty important. And how do you do that without burning yourself out? Well, an easy way to do it is to simply share things through your newsfeed. So perhaps it is sharing articles, perhaps it is blogging, and sometimes if you have something specific that you want to share with like a specific person, for example, like you read an article that really made you think of this person, feel free to do that. I've definitely done that before, and I think it's a nice way to say, hey, thinking about you and still hope you're doing well. So I would take every opportunity you can to do things like that. It doesn't have to be a huge investment. For me personally, I probably take about an hour every 1 to 2 weeks just to make sure I'm reading articles and sharing things in LinkedIn, Twitter, on my personal blog, and other sites. So it's not a huge investment, and it pays a whole lot of dividends down the road.
Great. Raymond asks, if we end up sending you an invite to connect over LinkedIn, would you possibly accept our invitation or not really?
So that is the ultimate test, is if I don't know you, I probably will not accept your invitation. But thank you for the question. And, I think for me personally, I just would rather I'd rather know the people that I'm connecting with so that I can then refer them to other people who wish to connect with them in the future. So, maybe in some other context, we'll get to know each other, whether it's at a NAP conference or the convention or the Leadership Academy. But, once we meet in person or on the phone, happy to connect. I think we can probably take
Great.
2 more questions.
Sure. So if anyone has any burning questions that I have not addressed yet or it was sparked by some of the latest conversation, go ahead and type it in. Meanwhile, I'll take a look at some of the older questions that I tried to kind of lump together. Let's see. Okay. How far back should your LinkedIn profile go? Should you list all the jobs or just the latest few years? Question comes from Glencoe.
So I think it depends on how much experience you have. Let's say you have 30 years of work experience and you don't necessarily want to list your college internship. I totally get that, and I think that's very legit. And maybe you went through a few career changes and you don't want to go all the way back to your prior career as, a rock star or something that's just completely unrelated. This is really up to you and your discretion. So think about your resume. What do you have on that resume when you send it off to somebody? Does it go back 10 years, 20? Maybe you're just out of college and you barely have anything to showcase except your internships. Well, showcase your internships and your volunteer experience. So I think it's really dependent on the job that you're going for, or your end goal. If your end goal is to find a job in a certain industry and your career in a related industry only goes back so far, then maybe it does make a lot of sense to cut it off at a certain point. But it's up to you. I would say just pay real close attention to what is industry standard, what do recruiters look for, what do hiring managers look for, and when you look at the resumes and different online presences of your peers, what do they tend to share? So there's a lot of different factors at play here, and it's a really personal decision. But ultimately, at the end of the day, your goal is to come off as somebody who's professional, experienced, and who's very capable. So whatever gets you there is what you should have on your profile.
Great. Let's see. We have a couple of more questions. I see one from James who asks, would you be willing to preview my profile in Chinese for me to see what it looks like? I speak some Chinese, but not well.
So yes, you can have your profile in different languages, which is really useful for when you're working abroad or you're trying to do a summer internship or a summer program. So that's a really great feature. For me personally, I can't actually read Chinese, so you probably need somebody who reads fluent Chinese, not just speaks it, who can go over your profile and give you some really good feedback. So I highly recommend, grabbing a peer or colleague or mentor and having them take a quick look at your Chinese profile to see, what on there should you keep, what should you take off, how would you change the wording of certain things. And somebody ideally who knows the context. So if you're going for something in China, then for them to understand the kind of culture in China is really important, because then they can help you know, what is proper or not proper to say on your LinkedIn profile. I think we can actually do one last question, Cindy.
Awesome. Great. Last question. I found a new feature in some free online education, such as Coursera, that allows posting certificates in LinkedIn for each class that you complete successfully. But there are verified versus non-verified certificates. What is your perspective on posting certificates of this nature on your profile?
I love this question because it is awesome that you, first of all, are taking these classes on Coursera, edX, Udacity, General Assembly. So that is something where if you have done that, why not showcase it? It's something that recruiters, I just read a study on how recruiters do value that. And I have friends who have taken these boot camps or these free courses online and have actually switched careers after doing that. One of my good friends switched into computer programming from pharmacy after having taken some edX classes. So once you do that, I would highly recommend taking those certificates and putting them on your LinkedIn profile, because that way recruiters know that you are for real. You've gone through the course, you've passed it, and you are certified to perform that skill really well. So I say go for it and report back to me and let me know how that goes. Would love to hear, your stories of what recruiters think and what your network thinks about some of the certificates you're getting. But this new online education movement it's something that's really exciting, and with LinkedIn's recent acquisition of lynda.com, it gets a lot more exciting, because what we can do is then begin to tell members what courses they can take to get to their dream job and what skills they might be missing to get from A to B. So we can match those missing skills with potential courses, and it's just a very exciting time right now for skill development and online courses. And with that, I think we are done. So thank you guys so much for joining. I had a lot of fun sharing some LinkedIn tips with you on how to, pump up your LinkedIn profile. If you have any other questions, feel free to message me on LinkedIn, and I will try to get back to you as soon as I can. I think Cindy might have some closing announcements, potentially announcing the convention and other things. So stay tuned for some of Cindy's announcements. But thanks, guys, for making this a lot of fun.
That's great. Thanks, Esther. You are right. I do want to share a couple slides. Currently, you all see a poll that's evaluating our webinar this evening. I'm going to wrap up the poll in order to be able to share just a couple of things. So slide one. So this free webinar was brought to you by the National Association of Asian American Professionals. At the national level, we try to have a free webinar every month that relates to professional development. We also have some that are featuring women speakers in our Women in NAP series. That's an initiative that is taken on by various chapters. Some of our chapters have had Women in NAP programs for about 5 years. So you see up on my screen the 26 chapters. Our oldest one is in New York. Our newest one, I believe, is Milwaukee. So welcome to our various chapters. We have about 3,000 members and a reach of 20,000 professionals across the country. We also have some student chapters or campus chapters starting, including Drexel University. The next slide shows how you can stay in touch with us. There's future webinars coming up. Just look on our website, nap.org, and look under programs. Then we also have our big marquee event, which is a training, a networking opportunity, and just a lot of fun. We'll have some very renowned speakers. First, we're going to cover the ERG Summit, which is Thursday, August 6th. ERG stands for Employee Resource Groups. If you're in private sector, you may have joined a specific group that's either focused on Asian ethnicity or a professional subsector or a group of women or a group of older employees, whatever, and they contribute to the bottom line. So ERG Summit will focus on how to expand your group or to start your group. The convention is August 7th and 8th. All of these events are in Dallas, Texas, and the website for our activities, our agenda, our speakers, and our pricing is at napconvention.org. There are some student scholarships coming up, so keep your eye out for that. You can join one of our chapters or go as a guest to one of their activities. We also have the NAP 100 award nominations for lifelong contributors or emerging professionals, and that's open until June 1st. You'll find that on nap.org. Our social media links are listed at the bottom: Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn group. You'll have to spell out National Association of Asian American Professionals, either to find the national group or your chapter group. With that, I thank you for coming this evening. I hope that you will keep a lookout for other webinars as they are scheduled. And we are pretty much wrapped up. I'll see if there's any other questions. Any final words from Esther?
Nope, just thanks guys for attending, and it was really great to hear your questions.
Yeah, they were really good. We do have one question: where are we going to post the slides? The slides and the recording will be at nap.org under the program section for national webinars. Oh, poor Steve. Sorry you missed it. It's going to be posted. Okay, great webinar. Thank you. Thank you, Lester, for taking time out of your busy life and joining us this evening, everyone. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.